Good day, I'm Scott Mueller with S&J Hardware USA. I want to take a moment today and talk to you a little bit about the Remington 870, and I want to talk to you about some changes to the trigger group that many people choose to do. I personally choose to do them as well. The first change I do is I install an oversized S&J Hardware safety in the trigger group. Second thing I do is I install a forged machined extractor. And the third thing I do is I install a new carrier dog spring so the lifter has just a more positive function, especially under heavy recoiling loads. Now the 870 is made in many different versions. This happens to be an express model, but to upgrade the trigger group to a police model, you need to put in a black carrier dog spring and you need to put in the forged machined extractor. So we're going to cover that. First thing I'm going to do is talk to you about disassembly of the 870, and I am wearing safety glasses. I recommend you all wear safety glasses when you're doing maintenance on your firearms. Okay, first thing I'm going to do, this is a 28-inch barrel Remington 870 Express model. I'm going to remove the magazine cap and lift off the barrel. Set that right there, and we're going to lift off the barrel. Okay, the 28-inch barrel is off of there. Now I'm going to remove the slide and the bolt. Okay, we're going to remove the slide and the bolt. And to do that, you have to push your fingers up past the lifter. This is the lifter. Okay, and then you need to push on the slide on the left side of the receiver. And then that'll allow you to move this slide all the way forward, and with that will come the bolt. So I'm going to push my finger up there, hit the release here, hit the rails, and I'm going to be able to pull it all the way off. So I have it started. Now I'm going to pull it all the way off, and we're going to take that all the way off the firearm. And this is the bolt. Okay, the bolt is off. And again, I did that by sticking my hand inside the receiver and pressing against the left side of this rail, and that got it past this stop. Okay, pushing it toward the outside gets it past the stop, so you're able to pull this all the way off. Now we have the bolt here, and with this bolt is where the extractor goes. Okay, so on the Remington Express models, they use a metal injection molded extractor. It's an inexpensive part to fix. I'm not aware of any failures, but many people I know and the police models of the 870, they do use the forged extractor, forged machine extractor, and that is a Remington part number F as in Frank 16176. So that is the forged machined extractor. Very high quality part. Many people are going to just automatically change that out. Now to change it out, it's a pretty simple process. I have it kind of down to a science, and what I found that works the best for me is I have a Leatherman tool, and on this tool there's a very fine flat blade screwdriver which works well for me. It fits my hand well, it's strong, it's not flimsy, it doesn't chip, so that's what I use. But you could use whatever suits you, but you're going to need to have a small flat bladed tool. And to remove it, you have to press down on the plunger, and then you're going to lift up on the extractor and pivot it out and take it all the way out. Okay, so we're going to try that. I usually set it upright on the ground or on the table like this. I'm going to move the forend a little bit. I'm going to insert this small flat blade screwdriver in here, and then I'm going to push down on the plunger. At the same time, I'm going to be lifting up on the extractor. Sometimes it's a little tricky. I'm going to try this again. Just got to get it inserted in there, and then I'm going to lift it up and then pivot it out. So I lift it straight up and then I pivot it this way, and it'll lift all the way out of the bolt. Okay, so we have the metal injected molded extractor out of there. I'm going to set that over to the side, and then to put the new machined extractor in, We just have to kind of line it up, and then we have to push it down and then pivot it upright, okay? It's very easy. You don't need any tools to install it. So I'm going to push it down and then pivot it this way, and now it's installed, okay? I always test the function of it, make sure it moves smoothly, make sure that plunger moves smoothly, okay? So that's the first change to the bolt, is we put the forged machined extractor in there, okay? And when we're all done with this, we're going to do a function test as well to make sure that the gun functions reliably, okay? So I'm going to set that bolt to the side. Now we are going to remove the trigger group. And to do that, I'm going to use some various size punches. Now this is a Craftsman brand punch. It is a 5/32, and for me that works the best to get out the trigger pins. Okay, so I'm going to kind of hold it up like this and push down on this. Let me see, I got to brace this up on something. Let me see if I could do it this way. And then I have a non-marring hammer here. Okay, we're going to get out that front trigger pin and then the back trigger pin. Okay, then we're going to pull the pin the rest of the way out, and that will allow the trigger group to come completely free. So this is the trigger group of the Remington 870 Express. It has a polymer trigger guard, whereas the police versions have a steel trigger guard. I have not had any trouble with the polymer trigger guard. And then this is the shell carrier here. And we're going to put a heavier spring in that. And we're also going to put in a new safety. This is the factory safety. It has a kind of a small button on there. I'm a left-hand strong side shooter, so I like to have a bigger button so I could activate it with my left thumb. And we're going to start with that. So to get that safety out, we're going to use a very small punch. This is a Craftsman 1/16 of an inch punch. And there's a pin in here which is tapered at one end. So we're going to find which end is tapered, and we're going to push on that end, and we're going to have it go out the opposite end of that. There's a spring and a ball bearing in here, so you want to cover up the top of the trigger guard with your thumb as you're removing the pin that holds the safety spring in place. Okay, so I have my thumb covering the top of it. I'm going to go ahead and push out the pin. And I pushed it all the way out. And again, it's a pin that has a taper on one end. We're going to put that in front of the table, and then we're going to gently tap this on the ground. And here we have the spring and the ball bearing out. Okay, with the S&J Hardware safeties that you purchase, the oversized safety buttons for the Remington, we do include a new spring, and we do include a new ball bearing. Not because you need them, but only because you might lose one of these when you're doing this. Okay, we want to set you up for success, so we include those value-added parts for you. Okay, so I'm going to set these parts down, and I'm going to just remove the safety button. Okay, so it comes all the way out, goes straight through. This is the factory safety button. I'm going to put that over to the side. And now the S&J Hardware safety button, we're going to go ahead and place that in. I'm going to insert it. I'm going to insert it from the right side and move it through. The right side has the bigger pad on it, the oversized part. I'm going to go ahead and put it in there. And then we're going to put in the ball bearing. Give that a little nudge down there, and then we're going to put in the spring. And that falls right in there. And now we are going to start this pin back in there, okay? So we want the pointed or the tapered part of the pin pointing to the left. We want to start it in the right side here. And then we need to push that spring out of the way so that pin could go all the way through. I'm going to use this small punch and just push that spring out of the way so the pin could go straight through. And we almost got it here. There we go. So I just had to use that tool to push that spring down. I had to use the punch to push the spring down, and then that allowed me to push that pin straight across. Okay, now we're going to check it, and it's moving back and forth. Very positive detent. That's what the ball bearing and the spring does. And again, when the safety is pushed all the way to the left, the firearm is ready to fire. When it's pushed over to the right, it will not fire, and we should test that. Okay, we're pulling the trigger, the hammer stays back. Okay, so that's how you replace that oversized safety. Very common, not very difficult. Okay, I'm going to move that 16th punch out of the way. Now we are going to replace the factory carrier dog spring with a police model spring. The factory spring is silver, the police model spring is black, and the part number for the spring is F16966. So again, the part we're using for the carrier dog spring is this F as in Frank 16966. It is a 1100 carrier release spring, but in this case we're using it in the 870 trigger group as a carrier dog spring. So how we're going to change this out, and this is a little bit more tricky than the safety, I like to use a tapered punch. Okay, and this tapered punch is actually a 5/32 tapered punch, and we need to pull out this pin right here which holds the carrier and the carrier dog. Okay, on pump shotguns there's a retainer spring on one side. Okay, a little half moon shaped spring that helps retain this pin in here. On semi-automatic shotguns there's two retainer springs. On 1100s there's just one. Okay, and in this case it's on the right side of this trigger group. So what I'm going to do is use this tapered punch to push through here, and that'll push this retaining pin all the way out. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and slide it, start on the left, push it straight through, and I have the retaining pin all the way out. The retention spring is still in the groove where it belongs, so I'm going to set that down. Now I'm going to hold down the carrier dog. That's what this part is. It's the carrier dog, and I'm going to remove the punch out of here, and we're going to try to lift the whole carrier off the trigger group. And you have to be careful because that carrier dog is under a little spring tension now. So I lifted this off. My thumb is on top of the carrier dog, and then we'll take that out. So I'm going to take out the carrier dog. That silver spring is in here. I'm going to go ahead and move that silver spring to the side, and I'm going to install the black spring, which is under a little bit more tension. It's a slightly shorter spring, but it's tempered to a higher tension. So we're going to put that in there. We're going to re-put this back in the trigger group where it belongs. Okay, now we need to line up the carrier dog and the carrier. So the carrier dog, on the carrier dog side of the carrier, there's two retention points. You got to nest them together so the pin could go all the way through them. Okay, so I'm going to do that. We're going to set it on here, and we're going to push everything together, hold everything together, and then I'm going to use the tapered punch to get everything lined up again from the left side this time. So I'm going to push that through there, push that through there, and I'm going to start over. I don't have it quite lined up right. Got to get the carrier dog against the carrier spring. This is the part where you're going to have to fiddle with it a little bit. Okay, we're starting over here. Okay, now we're going to get everything lined up. Let's try this again. Of course, this always works out perfect in rehearsal, but when you make the video, it's a little more troublesome. It's just Murphy's Law. Okay, so now we got it in there. Now we're going to put the tapered punch in. Get that lined up. And the carrier dog is still against the plunger. Okay. Now we're going to take this pin that we took off. It's a hollow pin. We're going to start it back on the tapered punch. And we're going to orient it however you want to with that retention spring. I'm going to orient it like the capital letter D with the flat side facing me. And then we're going to try to get everything moving back to the left. Okay? We're going to have this tapered punch kind of help us guide it in there. And it's just tricky to line it up. Let me see where we're at here. Okay, got it all the way in. And okay, so the tapered punch, as I was moving that hollow pin in, I'm just gradually moving out this punch to get it lined up. Okay, so now that's officially correctly installed. And then this is the carrier, and it has a little stronger action, I think. It'll give you very firm, solid action, which is important when you're shooting heavy loads through an 870. Okay, heavy loads are full power shotgun slugs, heavy pheasant loads, heavy steel shot loads, 3-inch magnums. Those are all heavy recoiling loads. So I think having a little more sure action on the carrier certainly won't hurt. Okay, so now on this trigger group, we've installed the 870 oversized safety. We've installed the carrier dog spring, and on the bolt we've installed the machined forged extractor. So we did some fairly substantial upgrades in a matter of a short period of time. Okay, so now we're going to put everything back together. We're going to start with the trigger group. I'm going to hold the receiver upside down. We're going to set the trigger group in here. Okay, and then we're going to line up those pins. I usually like to do the front pin first, which is smaller. Start that in here. And then I do use the non-marring hammer. Tap that in there. Okay, and then we're going to put in the bigger pin, and again, we're going to use the non-marring hammer. Just try to line it up as good as you can. Start it in there by hand and tap it in with the hammer. Okay, so we got the trigger group back in there. Okay, now we're going to put the slide back on there, and for that we will need the bolt pieces. This is a little tricky, so I always like to start it on here first. And then I hold the slide and the magazine tube with one hand while I set the pieces of the bolt back on here. Okay, and then we're going to start it going into the receiver. Now in this case, we have to reach up through the bottom, move the carrier out of the way, and we need to push on the arm on the right side, and that'll get it to go in the rest of the way. So I'm putting my hand up here. I'm going to push on the right side, and I'm going to push on the left side. Let's see here. We'll try to get it all the way in. This is hanging up a little bit. There we go. Yeah, so I pushed on the right side and the left side, and that'll get the bolt the rest of the way in. Okay. And now we're going to just install the barrel, and for that I always like to have the action open a little bit. We're going to go ahead and put the barrel on here. Okay, and then we're going to put the magazine cap on. function test it. Okay, I have some snap caps here, which are very, very important. Whenever you are doing changes to your shotgun and you need to prove the action, it's important to use these snap caps. They weigh as much as a shot shell, but they are inert. There's no primer in them, but they're the correct length for a 12 gauge shell and the correct weight. So we're going to go ahead and insert these in here and just put 3 of them in here. Okay, and then we're going to hit the action release to get one in the chamber, and then we're going to take the safety off and try the trigger. Okay, so they all 3 action through there just fine. Action stays closed. The safety is activated, so the trigger does not go. So all those changes successfully worked on this 870. So again, those are just some basic things you may want to consider upgrading on your 870. And if you have any questions, go ahead and email me at sales@sjhardware.us. And also please like and subscribe. That will encourage me to do more videos like this, so please subscribe. Thank you.